please like our video and subscribe to RotoWire. Then go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.
Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm Clay Link, here with RotoWire.com's lead prospect writer, James Anderson. Great to be back talking prospects with you, James. This is our second go of the pod today. Some audio issues. Hopefully we never have to re-record a podcast again after this. But we couldn't upload some spotty audio and some weird crackling sound. So our second go, hopefully this audio is a little better. James, how are you doing today? Even though I already know the answer.
Well, recording the same podcast for a second time, so hanging in there.
Always ideal. Well, between the first and the second show, though, James, your Brewers signed Kolten Wong. Any initial thoughts?
Yeah, man, what a signing!
I love it.
Yeah, I actually have some Kolten Wong in some dynasty leagues, so I like it there. I am really, really ecstatic that I don't have to watch Keston Hiura play much second base in the short term here. Ideally, I mean, I'm sure maybe against some lefties he might be over there, but yeah, it's a good signing for the Brewers. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of people talking about how it's a good signing on Twitter and how Kolten Wong's fantasy value is trending up and
how it helps the pitching staff not having Keston over there, and Keston to first probably, and then what? Swaggy V. That's a nickname that hasn't been said on this show in a while. Swaggy V to the bench. To DH.
Well, I think we will see what happens with the DH. If there's a DH in the NL, then I think you'll see Vogelbach and Hiura platoon at DH, and then Hiura would start at first base against righties.
That makes sense.
But if there is no DH, I don't know if that Vogelbach contract is fully guaranteed or not. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not fully guaranteed in case there is no DH, because I can't really picture them carrying him without the DH in the NL. But yeah, I mean, I think Hiura will be first base / DH, and maybe he gets some starts at second base against lefties, but first base will be his primary position moving forward, and I'm sure he'll still be terrible there, but it probably won't cost the team as many runs with him at first base as it did at second base.
Yeah, that's probably right. We are on YouTube, by the way, and if you're watching there, I have shaved my beard, mostly just getting a fresh start after the magazine essentially put to rest. James, congrats to you. Great work. You wrote 200 plus prospect outlooks, your top 200 out of 400 in there, and also ranking the rookies. So you had obviously a huge role in it. Congrats on a job well done, my friend.
Yeah, right back at you.
Thank you.
You put in a ton of work behind the scenes. I mean,
as did you.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to be done with that, though, and so we can focus on our normal content for February and March.
Yeah, it's just good to put a bow on that, send it off to the printers, and I want to stress, though, that is not going to be on newsstands this year, given the COVID-19 pandemic. So the only place to get yours, rotowire.com/magazine. Again, rotowire.com/magazine. I think for subscribers, it's only like $5.99. It's a really good deal, and if you appreciate James's work, you appreciate my work, and also, Rob Silver's in the magazine this year. Joe Sheehan, we have Alex Chamberlain. So please support the work that they did and that we did, if you can. James, your idea for the show today was pretty much just a prospect, mailbag, and you threw out the request on Twitter. Got some good responses, so let's just dive in. Eddie Willis wanted to know, with the minor leagues in flux, does this impact who you target in first-year player drafts? Do international guys get a bump because they're still playing, hitters over pitchers because there's more data from the alternate site / batting cages? How do you evaluate with no games being played?
I would just say don't overthink it, especially with the first-year player drafts. I mean, everyone's kind of in the same boat there. The international guys have pretty much done about what they would have done in a normal year. Some of the best prospects from the draft went to their alternate sites and everything. So just don't overthink it. I mean, the hitters over pitchers thing, I think you may be reading a little too much into it there. We still get pitch velocity data on pitchers. So, exit velocity data on hitters versus pitch velocity data on pitchers. I mean, it kind of canceled each other out there.
Very nice. Then Chris Valenci asks, do you think Wander Franco debuts in 2021? And at which position?
I think he does, but I'm not super confident in that. I think it's not a foregone conclusion that he debuts this year. I think the shoulder injury is a initial obstacle, perhaps, to him having a big spring training. That could impact his performance early on in the season. And then, it's what type of role opens up at the big league level. If it's everyday playing time somewhere, if they trade Willy Adames, that would go a long way to helping Wander Franco debut this year. If Adames or Brandon Lau or Joey Wendell suffered an injury, that would definitely help him get in there. But if it's just to take up a spot on the bench, I think they would go with someone like Vidal Brujan or Taylor Walls, probably over Franco. So we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of different ways it could happen. He will debut with shortstop eligibility in pretty much all leagues because that's where he's listed right now. And then third base is definitely a possibility. Second base is a possibility as well. I mean, he could end the year eligible in all three of those spots if he does get the call.
When we talked earlier, you put it about 60-40, and I was a little surprised by that. Just people drafting not Willy Adames, Wander Franco like he's going to be a staple in their lineup this year, and it doesn't sound like you're so sure that he does get the call. He's still your number one prospect, though. I'm liking these Willy Adames to the Reds rumors. I think that could be a good fit. That would, of course, pave the way. When we talked to Ralph Lifshitz on our show, the XM show recently, he mentioned that over at Prospects Live, they have bumped up Jared Kelenic into the number one spot, and they had some concerns about, or he mentioned some concerns about the batted ball numbers with Franco and maybe some like a ground ball lean. Is that starting to creep in? Like, do you have some concerns about how the bat will play?
Not long term, but I think it's a short term issue for sure. It's not too dissimilar from what we've seen with Vlad Jr., where it's just the production hasn't quite met expectations because he's putting too many balls on the ground. When you look at Wander Franco's track record in the minor leagues, the ground ball rate's higher than you'd like to see, but the production has just been so off the charts that it's like I'm not surprised that he hasn't overhauled his swing when he's been at least 50% better than the average hitter in every league he's played in and walked more than he struck out. So I just think there's a ton to work with there from a skill standpoint and a tool standpoint, and he'll eventually get it all straightened out. I definitely would take Kelenic over him 10 times out of 10 for 2021 though. And that's not that's a legitimate argument in Kelenic's favor.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting tidbit from Ralph Lifshitz and our friends over at Prospects Live, and just wanted to get your take. Joe McHugh says, there's a pack of starters, James, on your top 400 that are all close or have had debuts, Clarkschmidt to Daniel Lynch. Can you talk about some floor versus ceiling guys in that range and expectations for 21-22? And for this exercise, let's just assume no one has Tommy John for this.
Yeah, so the range he's talking about is 48 to 56. Clarkschmidt, Casey Mize, Michael Kopech, Spencer Howard, Logan Gilbert, Edward Cabrera, Simeon Woods Richardson, Daniel Lynch. Honestly, there's not a ton from a floor or ceiling standpoint that distinguishes any of those guys for me, which is why they're so bunched up. They all have number two starter upside. I think Clarkschmidt, Casey Mize, Logan Gilbert, and Simeon Woods Richardson are probably the best bets to be long-term starting pitchers when you factor in arsenal, command, pitchability. Michael Kopech is a total wild card. He's got amazing stuff when he's on command. We'll see how his command looks when he comes back this year. Spencer Howard, it's really kind of all about durability. He's got as high a ceiling as any of these guys. He flashed that in the Arizona Fall League back in 2019, but obviously was a different pitcher this past year. So we'll see how he holds up under a starter's workload. Edward Cabrera and Daniel Lynch are pretty similar. Really, really great fastballs, great breaking balls. We'll see how the changeup kind of comes along with those guys, but it's tough. It's really tough to differentiate. I think the notion of floor and ceiling with pitchers, I think, often gets overused and overstated because there's so many pitchers where you would have set a certain floor or a certain ceiling when they were a prospect, and then it just completely changes. And it's probably going to come down to command with all these guys. If we're assuming they're all healthy, like who commands their fastball the best? I think that typically is what kind of ends up determining whether you're a number 2 or a number 3.
We were both pretty in on Clarkschmidt last year in the main event that we shared together. We picked him up and stashed him without any fruits for our stashing labor. And I'm doing this first pitch Arizona speakers draft right now with a stacked crew of players, and we're now in the 33rd round, and Clarkschmidt's still hanging around. I'm trying to force that recency bias of getting burned a little bit out of my head, and I may take Reyes Moronta over him. But I need to I still think there's quite a bright future with Schmidt. Just the way they broke him in kind of in the bullpen, didn't seem to really trust him. I think, obviously with all pitchers after they debut, they lose some shine, the new car off the lot type of thing. But he's hanging around a little bit further, a bit longer than I expected, and I'm eyeing up Clarkschmidt in this draft. Joe McHugh, we already got to Joe's question. Scott says he sees a lot of parallels between Brent Honeywell and Forrest Whitley. How are you by far the highest on Whitley, but Honeywell has dropped like a stone? Can you explain the disparity?
Sure. Yeah, well, Honeywell, I think he probably did drop on this last update, but he's been well outside my top 100 for a while. And there's not a ton separating middle of the 100s versus middle of the 200s, but Honeywell, I like the best version of Forrest Whitley more than I like the best version of Brent Honeywell, so there's one starting point. Honeywell is almost 3 years older than Whitley. He has one minor league option remaining, so there's kind of a ticking clock here with Honeywell where he probably gets worked in relief, at least initially. Team context doesn't really help Honeywell either. The Rays are not necessarily going to need to stretch him out to extract value given how much talent they have on the roster. And all of Honeywell's struggles have been health related. He hasn't pitched for 4 years or whatever it is, just because of health. Whitley's struggles have been twofold. There've been health issues, but there have also been some performance issues. And he's a 6'7" pitcher who's still just 23 years old. Tyler Glasnow didn't really put things together till he was 25, 26. And you'll see that is not uncommon with those sort of really long, lanky pitchers. So I think Whitley has always had a higher ceiling than Honeywell. And I think that there's just less of that just crazy health track record that Honeywell's had, which to me it's more kind of it reminds me of Kyle Zimmer with the Royals back in the day. Just one of those guys who it's one thing after the other with the arm, and it's just been kind of nonstop. Whereas Whitley's had more injuries than you'd like for sure. But I still think there's a chance that he kind of can pull through this and still become the guy that I thought he was going to be, whereas Honeywell, I think that ship has kind of sailed.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. We saw Honeywell in the Arizona Fall League, and he was throwing that screwball or whatever it is, and he just had that huge arsenal, and we all thought, the future's bright. But that was, 4 or 5 years ago? And just injury after injury after injury. And it's been tough to watch. I'm pulling for Honeywell, but is he out of options now?
This is his last year with
an
minor league
option.
option.
Interesting. Speaking of the Rays, by the way, they brought in Chris Archer, and just the dollar figure on that deal, the Rays, $6.5 million, makes me think they're pretty encouraged by his progress. So it is thoracic outlet syndrome surgery, which the track record, is pretty much nil of guys returning to their pre-surgery self, in total. But I have to feel like that dollar figure says they're highly encouraged by what they've seen with Archer's progress. Do you read that into that signing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you give him that if you're not feeling okay about him physically. I think they also probably think they have the perfect role for him. They probably think that they know how to best extract the most value possible out of him.
Yeah,
I would
put him in
imagine
a good position to succeed. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. Like I think he's definitely never going to face the same hitter more than twice. Probably they're going to try to work it so that he only faces the best hitters on each team once. I mean, you can use an opener to kind of do that. And, maybe you have an opener who just has a completely different release point, arm angle than Archer. And you think that you can maybe get like 120 good innings out of him in some sort of primary pitcher role.
Yeah. And if he's in that, I think he's back on the fantasy radar. Obviously, you'd like to see him, but if he's in that primary role, better chance at wins and decisions. Good team, and I do trust that they will deploy him in an optimal manner. A quick note from Monkey Knife Fight. Now that your season-long fantasy basketball and fantasy hockey leagues have started, this is a great time to check out our friends at Monkey Knife Fight, the fastest-growing site in daily fantasy. The NHL and NBA are in full swing, and NFL playoffs are here. The time is now to take advantage of a 100% instant match up to $50 on your first deposit by using the promo code RotoWire. Visit monkeyknifefight.com and use promo code ROTOWIRE today. Back to our mailbag here, James. John H. wants to know, do you prefer high floor or high upside prospects?
Well, I prefer high upside prospects, but I just think there is...
You don't say.
This is kind of one of my... And I'm not saying that John doesn't understand this, but
no.
It's kind of one of my big pet peeves is that people will attach like, oh, this guy with like a really good hit tool, but he doesn't have plus raw power and he's not like a 70 grade runner. He's mostly floor. He doesn't have much ceiling. Whereas this guy with like 70 grade power and, questionable hit tool has just such a high ceiling. I think that a lot of the guys that people think have really high floors have really, really high ceilings because of those floors, like that base of skills that a guy like Alex Bregman or Francisco Lindor or like Anthony Rendon has as a hitter allows them to have that really high ceiling where they could be a number 3 hitter or a number 2 hitter and just get you a ton of counting stats, and they eventually tap into more power than you were expecting because they're such good hitters. So I think a lot of the guys that most people think of as high floor prospects actually have high ceilings as well. And it's just, people just get so obsessed with raw power or sprint speeds and like speed grades and stuff like that. Obviously the guys that have the crazy speed, like a CJ Abrams, like that's a big differentiating tool. And like CJ Abrams probably has the highest ceiling of any prospect in the minors because of that speed. But, just a guy that might be a 70 grade hitter that you only project for like 20 to 25 homer power and like 10 to 15 steals, like that could end up being Ozzie Albies or something like that. Right. So, I mean, I just think people get a little too carried away with saying floor, ceiling, and kind of black and white in terms of the analysis.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like players get slapped with that high floor and they just are thought to have no upside. But like with Frankie Lindor, Brian Hayes, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Zach Gallen, wasn't perceived to have that high of an upside. So
well, right, Zach Gallen, and the pitching side of this is totally applicable as well, because people will just look at velocity, but I mean, teams are now starting to realize like you can have a really good fastball that sits 94 miles an hour if it's got the right kind of vertical movement and everything like that. And Gallen was getting that number 4, number 5 starter tag just because of his fastball velocity. But when you can really pitch, and when you have a couple really good secondaries, and you know how to sequence, and you know how to locate your fastball, I mean, I think that just goes a long way.
Yeah, and just players that seem to have a high floor doesn't mean they don't have high upside too. It's just something to keep in mind. Ryan mentions Joe Adell and Gavin Lux. Now, those two players no longer meet prospect eligibility requirements that you use, James. But Ryan wanted to know where, if they did still have prospect status, would Joe Adell and Gavin Lux fit into your current top 400?
Yeah, they're both really tough to rank. I think Gavin Lux would be in that sort of Andrew Vaughn, Bobby Witt, Adley Rutschman range, so like 7 to 9. And I think Joe Adell versus Royce Lewis is a good toss-up to me. Like I think they both have really intriguing combination of power and speed, and then we're just kind of TBD on where the hit tool lands and everything like that. So I think Adell would be just outside the top 10. Lux would probably be just inside the top 10.
Nice. So you ended up with Lux in any of your drafts so far?
I haven't done a redraft league in months.
You did one really early in the off season, right?
I did 2 draft champions in like when the playoffs were still going on, and then I haven't done any real ones in a while.
But you're doing a high stakes dynasty draft.
Yeah, with Lux, it's really tough because I just love so many guys on that roster, and we don't know who's going to get to play. And there's not the type of discount on Lux that I would kind of hope there would be. I mean, a guy that I think is an absolute steal right now in redraft is Chris Taylor because of his multiple positions where he's eligible. Like he kind of chips in a little bit of everything, and he's not going to play every single day, but that Dodgers lineup is a spot you want to be in.
Yeah, I like Chris Taylor a lot too. I think it's second base, short, and outfield. It's really nice. And I mean, I would love to get him and Lux on some teams. But that doesn't seem like Lux has lost a ton of shine quite yet. Adell, on the other hand, his debut was such a disaster, and Joe Madden has already mentioned that he's likely headed back to the minors, that Adell's redraft stock has just plummeted in recent months. At AGE Baseball News wants to know, where would Dalton Varsha fall on your prospect list? No longer on there, but where would he rank, and would you flip him for Chris Rodriguez or Aaron Schunk?
Varsha would probably be down by, I'd probably have him after Joey Bart and maybe ahead of Ryan Jeffers. So, borderline top 100. The problem with Varsha is this could be the last year where he's eligible at catcher. I mean, we don't know that for sure, but it does seem like when he does play this year, it probably will be in the outfield. Maybe he gets some starts at catcher, but he really needs that catcher eligibility to be overly appealing, because an outfielder who does what he's projected to do, I mean, those guys aren't that hard to find, whereas a catcher, I mean, that's pretty awesome if you can get that production at catcher. The big problem is he's probably not going to open the year in the majors this year, so I think he's getting overdrafted in redraft leagues. If you're in a 2-catcher league, I would still take Varsha over the guys you mentioned. But in a 1-catcher league, I'd probably take both Chris Rodriguez of the Angels and Aaron Schunk over Varsha.
You and I were talking earlier this week about how Varsha's average draft position on the NFBC site has been skewed by one rogue drafter. Drafted him, like 50 something? Just crazy.
They're in the 30s, I think.
Oh man, yikes! Thanks for donating.
That had to have been some sort of like timeout. He was in the queue situation type of thing.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah, that's not a guy you want in your queue though. Even that early. Yeah, but even though that ADP has been skewed, I still think he's generally, if you take that pick out, he's still being overdrafted.
Right.
Just because, they like Carson Kelly and Varsha's got to move around and just, maybe time in the minors, who knows. Rob Middleman asks, how much does a prospect's current position in the field affect your rankings? Let's start with that one, then we can get on to the rest of Rob's questions.
Yeah, it really doesn't, unless I think that their defense is so bad that it could cost them playing time. Like if a guy's projected to just be fine at the positions he's supposed to play, then I don't really care which position he plays. Like out of any of the infield spots, any of the outfield spots, doesn't really matter. But like Ryan Mountcastle, Willie Calhoun, Francisco Mejia are some guys that I've been lower on in the past because of just how bad their defense is. It really puts that much more pressure on them to hit. And Mountcastle's in a nice spot because he doesn't have many people pushing him in Baltimore. But in general, like if you're a really bad fielder, then that means you have to be one of the best hitters on your team to play on most rosters. So when a guy's really bad defensively, like a Willie Calhoun, I'm going to be lower on them. And then I guess we can get into his specific farm system questions.
Yeah, I was going to go to Nolan Gorman. Does he take a hit because of Nolan Arenado's arrival?
Yeah, I don't think so, just because the Cardinals are really starved for position player prospects of Gorman's caliber. So whenever he's ready, he'll either play some combination of DH, left field, maybe some first base, and Goldie can DH. Like they'll find a spot for him just because of the way that system is. It's a pretty weak system right now. And they've got a lot invested in Gorman, so I think this just kind of buys him a little bit more time in the minors. He wasn't going to be a standout third baseman anyway, so I think they'll find a spot for his bat.
And then finally from Rob, I think most organizations probably can't have too many shortstops, but he wants to know if the Jays maybe have too many shortstops with Bo Bichette already there.
Well, I think they have too many third basemen. They have a lot of guys who were drafted or signed as shortstops. Austin Martin played a little shortstop in college. Jordan Groshans was a shortstop in high school, or Elvis Martinez was signed as a shortstop. But all those guys are going to end up at third base or somewhere else. And, Groshans, if he hits as expected, the bat will play anywhere. So you'll find a spot for him, whether it's the outfield or third base or first base, DH, whatever. Austin Martin can play all over the field, so I don't really think it matters with him. Or Elvis Martinez is probably 3 years away, so I don't think it really matters with him. Where you run into trouble is where the Rays are kind of right now, and I touched on that in the Farm Futures piece that went up yesterday. Like the Rays just have this glut of middle infielders / center fielders who are all pretty good prospects, but they're not game changer prospects. They're not guys that are just going to play no matter what. So it kind of hurts all of them because you just don't know which guy is going to get the opportunity. They're going to have really short leashes. They might just be stuck in like a 3 to 4 days a week type of thing. So that's where it really hurts, is when you have a bunch of guys that are close to the majors but aren't elite prospects. That's where you factor it in.
We'll pause for a quick second to bring you a word from BetMGM. Sports bettors know that magic happens when you turn a hunch into action and apply the right amount of expertise. That's why BetMGM has teamed up with RotoWire to offer new BetMGM customers a free 6-month RotoWire subscription when they place their first bet. Register on the BetMGM app or website and use promo code ROTO, that's ROTO, to claim your free subscription. Once you make your first sports wager, you'll receive a season's length of RotoWire's unmatched sports insights. Find out why BetMGM is the king of sportsbooks by signing up and placing your first bet today. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years of age or older to wager. Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, and New Jersey only. Please gamble responsibly. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado and Nevada, and 1-800-GAMBLER in New Jersey and West Virginia. In Tennessee, call or text the red line at 800-889-9789. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. Promotional offer not available in Nevada. Back to the mailbag, James. Chris wants to know, when do you think Spencer Torkelson debuts? Any chance he gets to AAA in 2021?
I think Torque debuts in early 2022. He might debut like the same week or the same month as Riley Green. I think Riley Green's going to open at AA and Torkelson's going to open at High A. I think Torkelson probably spends the bulk of this year at AA, and if he kind of kicks the door down, he'll get to AAA. But I think Torque will be a guy that you're going to see getting drafted inside the top 200 in drafts next year.
Nice. I can see that. Michael Raymond asks, what do you think are realistic numbers for Leody Taveras this season? And do you think he leads off for Texas?
I do think he leads off. I mean, he led off for them last year. They're even more embracing of a rebuild right now than they were last year. And he's one of the only guys on the 40-man roster who is clearly an everyday player for them long term. So I think you'd have to do really poorly over multiple weeks to fall out of that leadoff spot or fall out of the job. And I kind of buy the projection systems. I don't know why the Bat X and the Bat have him for only 13 steals, but I think he's 20 plus steals, double digit homers, batting average kind of around 240. So I'm totally cool with where he's going in drafts. I mean, there's some risk there, but this isn't a bad baseball player like a Malik Smith type of situation. Like Leody Taveras is a good center fielder with a bright future, and he's one of the only guys that has a bright future on this roster. So I feel pretty good about him where he's going.
Yeah, I know they brought back Delino to Shields on a minor league deal, but I don't think he's the future, and I think they realize that. There is some risk he gets sent back to the minors if he gets off to a slow start, but yeah, the speed where he's going is pretty reasonable. Not quite the speed tax you see with a lot of other young speedsters. Batman Baseball on Twitter wants to know, what two pitching prospects after 100 do you like the most to end up top 50 by this time next year?
So I wrote down 4 names. I think you're probably looking at the prep arms from recent drafts. There are some guys that are right outside the top 200, but maybe with the exception of Jackson Rutledge, I don't see those guys moving into the top 50. So Mick Abel, Daniel Espino, Blake Walston, Quinn Priester. If you made me pick 2, probably Abel and Walston. All those guys have really high ceilings, really great stuff. Still all really risky, just kind of given that they're high school arms. Probably 2 of them will end up needing some sort of surgery before the start of next season, and then the other 2 will probably have really good years and be kind of knocking on the door of the top 50.
Very, very nice. Tyler wants to know, a couple prospects, a couple value prospects to target who have an ETA within 2 years. Sounds like he's pushing to compete pretty soon.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you some guys that I think are pretty undervalued, at least based on drafts I've seen and questions I've gotten. Aaron Schunk on the Rockies, who I have just inside my top 100. He seems to be a guy that some of our subscribers are kind of playing chicken with in their first year player drafts, where he's the top guy on my rankings, but they're trying to figure out where they need to take him. I think he's the Rockies. He's playing every day somewhere for the Rockies at some point in 2022. And then Jared Schuster, who the Braves selected in last year's draft. I think he's a guy that people are a little too low on. I kind of buy into the changes and the improved stuff his last year in college, and I think he could be a guy that's pitching in that rotation sometime in 2022, and he's someone that's falling a lot in first-year player drafts.
Russell Withers says he's been drafting Tyler Ivey in the final round of DCs. Of course, DCs referring to draft champions drafts on the NFBC, 50-round draft and hold. So pick 50, not a lot of downside, but is there actually a chance that Tyler Ivey pans out as a late pick in 2021?
Yeah, I think he probably debuts if he stays healthy. He's on the 40-man. He's going to open at AAA. The big question for me is just, is he going to be ready to handle a starter's workload this year? Because that was kind of the issue heading into last year. And of course, he didn't really get to answer that question based on how 2020 went. So, and he's also someone that even when he's been healthy, the Astros have really limited to like 3 and 4 inning outings. So I think he might be used as kind of a multi-inning bullpen guy this year. Someone I'd like to take a flyer on for the Astros is Luis Garcia, but you probably can't get him in the 50th round. I don't mind Ivy in the 50th round, but I just worry about how many times he'll actually be used as a traditional starter if he does come up.
Sean asks, do you think Hudson Head can bounce back up the rankings? Will his talent overcome the Pirates' developmental system?
So I know other people have Hudson Head ranked a lot higher than I do, but Hudson Head actually did move up my rankings on this last update. He's inside the top 200. I still don't like the swing. I don't like the hit tool. I think he's going to strike out too much, but the power and speed is definitely enticing. And I think the Pirates have just been the butt of so many jokes from a developmental standpoint. I think it's important to remember that they do have a different regime than the one that couldn't figure out what to do with Garrett Cole or Tyler Glass now. And we saw Ke'Bryan Hayes really surprise people last year. I just think it's too early to say that this new regime can't develop talent. I think it's more on just what's Hudson Head's strikeout rate like at low A, what's it like at high A. That's more important to me.
Very nice, man. Well, we're wrapping things up here with another question from Sean, actually. Did not see Braden Laura in your top 400. He says he knows some others have him near their top 100. What is it that makes you concerned, and what could Laura's upside be? Yeah, he's bigger than almost any baseball player his age who's gone on to have success. He's like 6'5". He's listed at 6'5", 240, and he's 18 years old. And that might be generous. It's like a Yordan Alvarez type of body, and probably worse than Yordan's was at the same age. So, maybe there's a chance that he is able to make it work and make enough contact. And I think DH is by far the most likely outcome for him defensively. So that really puts a lot of pressure on him to make enough contact. I think he's too big. I think these are the type of J2 guys that bust really quickly and they get into pro ball and you're just like, oh, wait, never mind. But I could be wrong, but it's just not someone that I would recommend using a roster spot on. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I imagine similar concerns with Jason Dominguez. You have him 19th, which is still high, and he's only 17 years old. But, man, I'm seeing that guy, and it's just he's huge for 17.
Yeah. Laura is built like a future offensive lineman, and Dominguez is built like an edge rusher, kind of. Like they both kind of have football bodies for sure. I think Dominguez is, he's got a chance to just be so special with his physical tools, like his bat speed. I think he's not going to be a 70 grade runner, but I think he could hold plus speed. He's just so athletic and so strong.
Did you see that MLB tweet, by the way, about Dominguez?
What was it? Mickey Mantle and
Babe, or not Babe Ruth, but like 3 of the greatest players ever were his player comps.
Is MLB, like, MLB has to just be sort of trolling everyone for like interaction on social media, right? Like,
yeah, because they know people are gonna have backlash
that
about
Donovan Solano over Ozzie Albies thing when they were doing the second base
shredder,
and it's like, that they're just doing that to generate like chatter, right? Because if they just released a non-controversial ranking of second basemen, who the hell would tweet about it?
That's probably true. That was just egregious, though. Just insane. We had Rob Silver on our XM show last week. We should have him back on just to bury the shredder. I mean, the shredder. Donovan Solano over like Ozzie Albies at second base. I found this tweet, by the way, Jason Dominguez. Bo Jackson, Mickey Mantle, Mike Trout. the comps. And yeah, everybody's like, oh, we wonder why these guys fall short of expectations sometimes. And yeah, that's.
I don't mind the Bo Jackson count.
Yeah, that's not bad.
That one, like, he's the rarest of the rare. Like, Bo Jackson, like, they teach you, like, when you're a scout, like, Bo Jackson's one of the guys you're not allowed to comp people to because there's just never going to be another like him. But Dominguez kind of looks a little bit like Bo Jackson, but yeah, I mean, the other two are just insane.
Yeah, the shredder just is amazing, and you're probably right that MLB probably knows better, tweeting from their official account, things like that, but they're just trying to stir up some conversation. I get it. At Concaso and at My Fantasy Luck asked you pretty similar questions about Jordan Westberg, James. Top 40 on some first-year player drafts. You're not so high on him.
Yeah, from 2 different accounts, I got basically the exact same question, and so I don't know if it's a bot or someone related to Westberg or something, but he's someone that in my pre-draft evaluations, I just didn't walk away liking. I didn't like the swing. I didn't like the strikeout rate, given the lack of game power. He seemed like a guy that had probably already peaked physically and might have been declining as a runner. And so I wasn't high on him pre-draft. He went higher than I expected him to go, but that just wasn't enough for me to really jump in. And there's definitely, I mean, if I was just ranking these like strictly like these are the 100 best guys to draft, sure, he probably should be in the top 100. But if I put him at 80, or if I don't rank him, you're not going to end up with Jordan Westerberg regardless. So I wanted to include another international guy that I really liked for people that wanted to throw darts late. Because, I mean, I'm low enough on Westerberg that you're not getting him for my rankings regardless of where I put him.
Well, 2 more questions, James. I really appreciate you doing this second go. I know all of our listeners do as well. Yeah, thanks for making it work this afternoon. Barry Baker asks, Milkar Perez or Jesus Parra, who has the higher ceiling?
Well, Barry has probably thought about these two more than I have. Barry loves diving for obscure international guys who might pop. Parra is the guy with more raw power right now. And so I'll go with Parra for the higher ceiling. I mean, neither of them are going to run much. We'll see how much they hit, but if one of them turns into a 20-plus homer guy, it would be Parra. So Perez is in the Mariners system, Parra's in the Brewers system. A couple guys to watch this year.
If you're just kind of joining us on this program today, you may have missed that Ian Kahn has joined The Athletic exclusively. He's been doing our dynasty rankings for a few years. So with him leaving, James, you are going to be taking those over, and AJ Smith wanted to know, when are you planning to release your dynasty rankings?
Yeah, I am going to release those next week. Hopefully that'll be our topic of conversation on the podcast next week. I'm taking feedback. If any subscribers want to let me know whether they'd prefer it to just be kind of the same format as Ian's. He always ranked for 15-team, 2-catcher league, standard roto. I'm open to ranking for leagues that start 20 catchers, leagues that start 30 catchers, 20-team leagues, 15-team leagues, OBP leagues. Like if someone has like strong feelings on that, let me know, because I can kind of adjust those and sort of tailor those as the users want. But those will be released next week.
Very cool, man. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to talking with you, not only on this show, but every Friday and Saturday on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. We're going to have a ton of guests. So if you want more of us talking baseball, we'll be doing that 2 hours every Friday and Saturday. James, really thanks a ton for making this work and re-recording with me. Anything else you want to mention before we sign off today?
Oh, man. Feels good to be back in the swing of things. Looking forward to doing it again next week.
Same, and congrats again on all the hard work and completing the mag. You were the man. And can't wait to talk soon, James, and hope you'll join us next week on the RotoWire Prospect Podcast.
Please like our video and subscribe to RotoWire. Then go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.